Hi, everyone. Welcome to the series Mud Talks, The Power of the Prototyping Mindset, How Embodied Questions Can Help You Build a Meaningful Life and Career with Professor Josh Brake. My name is Vanessa Chu, Assistant Director in the Office of Alumni and Parent Relations. We thank you for attending today's event. This talk is being recorded and will be distributed after the event. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Josh to kick it off. Josh, thanks for being here today. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm really enjoying this. This was a fun talk to put together, and I'm really hopeful about the types of conversations that we might spark after hearing and thinking about these ideas together. So first, I just wanted to start with a little bit about me. So I grew up in the Northeast in Connecticut and now live out here. We've been out here since 2014 when we moved out and I started my PhD at Caltech. The picture on the right-hand side there, you can see my family, me, my wife, Abby, and our two little kids that certainly keep us busy. Judah is 3.5 now. Chloe is 1.5. And I'm a man of many hobbies. So when I'm not on campus, I have a lot of other things that I enjoy doing in addition to spending time with my, with my family. I love to run, cycle, hike, make pizza, roast coffee, write, read, and play trumpet, among other things. In terms of my educational background, I did my undergrad at a small private Christian school in East Texas called Laterno University. And after finishing up there, I moved to Caltech, where I did my PhD in electrical engineering, and then have been at MUD since 2019 when I joined the engineering department as an assistant professor. So as I was thinking about putting together this talk and thinking about what I would talk about in the context of the prototyping mindset, I was trying to arrange my hopes for this talk in a couple main buckets. So one is I want to hopefully help you to get to know me a little bit better and tell you a little bit about my story and answer some questions. Who am I? And why am I so taken with this idea of the prototyping mindset and its value? Second thing I hope to do is to stimulate your curiosity in some way and really help you to think about, if you're really engaged with thinking about the prototyping mindset and hearing from my story, how might you maybe apply some lessons from that in your own context? And then the other thing that I love to do is create some on-ramps for future discussion and really think about how might we continue the conversation collectively beyond this, both at Harvey Mudd and then even more broadly than that. So what you're going to see today is really, I've tried to arrange this in a set of vignettes. So if you've ever had me in a class or you talk to any students who've had me, you'll know that I like to tell stories and think in analogies. And so that's kind of the overall framing today, is just a lot of kind of tidbits of thoughts and vignettes that I hope are thought-provoking for you. So I was thinking about the prototyping mindset. One of my favorite things to do in the summer is to be on a lake. So this is at one of my favorite places on earth, up in upstate New York, in the middle of the Adirondack Park in Speculator, New York. And my family has been vacationing up there for a long time. And my proposition is that life is a lot like riding a jet ski. Now, in the technical language, these are called personal watercraft. And if you go to do the safety training for these things to get licensed, one of the things that they try to beat into your head over and over and over again is, if the engine is off, you cannot steer. Okay. And the reason for this, if you go and you actually look up, if you're an engineer and you like to look at the patents for these things, you pull up the patent that Kawasaki owns for this jet propulsion system. And what you'll see is the way that this thing works is it has this rotor inside of here that's turning around to generate and pump the water through. And then at the back end here, the way that you actually are moving and kind of choosing which direction you want to go in is you have this, the jet of water is coming out the back, and then you're going to pivot that through this nozzle to be able to turn and where you're going. And the kind of tricky thing is, unlike other types of boats, which have a rudder, and so if you're moving in a certain direction, then you can still, steer in some way by moving the rudder. With the jet ski, because you are propelled forward and the steering is coupled with that propulsion through this nozzle, which is pointing you in a direction, when the engine's off, you have no matter what you do as you're turning the steering controls, you can't steer at all. So it's really counterintuitive, and the reason that these are a little bit dangerous in some contexts is people forget this. But the reason that I think that this analogy is really stuck in my head is that I think this is true about a lot of things in life, and is really kind of broadly applicable. And so the kind of proposition I want to start this talk with is one of the ways to kind of approach life is really make a plan and then get moving. That's like the important piece, is really this bias towards action. And that, I think, is really, for me, one of the major pieces that's at the root of the prototyping mindset and what makes it powerful. So how can you get moving then? One way, if you've taken any engineering classes, especially at Harvey Mudd, you've seen this a lot, right? Engineering design process is one of these ways that we can use as a framework to help us to get moving. And there's various different conceptions of the engineering design process, but this is one popular version of it that's called the Stanford hexagons. It's kind of popularized by Stanford, and has these 5 steps of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And what you'll see is each of these steps has a very particular goal of what you're trying to do in that step. So in empathize, you're really trying to connect with the people who are at the root of this problem, or really experiencing this problem. Maybe you're designing a tool for someone to be able to do something at their work better, right? You really want to understand them and the problem from their perspective. You want to see it through their eyes and really be in their shoes. The next step is maybe the most important part, which is really figuring out what is the problem, right? This is where you really hone the question. What is the question that you're going to use to base the rest of the design process on? And this is, it's really important to get clear on what's actually the root cause. And Toyota has this famous 5 whys exercise that they develop, right? Where you get to the root problem by asking why. I call it the toddler exercise too. But you get to the root of the problem by continuing to drill down and ask why to really understand what the problem is. After you empathize and define, the next step is really to ideate. And this is the fun brainstorming step where you really want to think super broadly and widely, all the crazy ideas. You don't have any kind of criticism or closing down. You always want to yes and think crazy thoughts and not really even care about feasibility at this standpoint. Then in the kind of latter half of that, you start to narrow down and you're going to build some sort of artifact that allows you to test out your idea, your proposed solution, test it. And then, of course, we know that the real power of the engineering design process is that it's performed in a loop. So the most important thing is actually not the strength or the value of any one iteration of this design process. It's actually the fact that you apply this thing over and over and over again. And I think sometimes what's lost when you think about it in these contexts is that we're looking at essentially a 2D projection of this design process. And I think it's better to use this picture on the right-hand side here, where you have like a spiral staircase, right? And the idea is that you go around and around and around and around. If you're looking down from an airplane on this thing, it may look like the person is just going around in circles. But if you look at this in 3D and pull out of that 2D projection, you'll see that actually this corkscrew type design is, as you continue to return to the same spot, you're now returning to the same spot at a different level in the Z dimension, right? As you're climbing in height. And I think that this is what's really powerful about the engineering design process as you're going to iterate through and through and through. So what do we mean when we say a prototype? There's a lot of different definitions out there, but when we actually want to prototype something, one definition that I like a lot is the one that's proposed by Scott Withoff in his Stanford D-School guide here. This is a prototype. And he says a prototype is an embodied question. I think the first thing that, as I'm looking at this embodied question, what on earth is that? But if we break it down, I think it really makes sense and it's a really good definition. So embodied means get it out of your head, right? It's not enough for this thing to just be a thought or an idea. It actually needs to be made manifest in some tangible way. And that might be a piece of software code. It might be a cardboard, low resolution prototype of some toy, or it might also be, an engineering solution to a problem, something that you're actually building out. And I think the thing that I see oftentimes is a rut that people fall into is that when they're dealing with this embodied thing is that this means that research, quote unquote, research doesn't count. You can't just read some articles on the web and call that a prototype. That's not embodied. And so really the way that I like to think about this, and we talk about it a lot in the department, is do a thing or talk to a person. right? This is the way that you can embody the question. The second half of it's really important, which is you really have to make sure that you take a frame of curiosity as you're approaching problems. You don't want to kind of narrow down and have an implied solution. You want to be sure that you're really considering all the different options. And this is really important in that ideation step that's at the center of the design process. Because if you define the problem in a way that it's really narrow and you don't allow yourself to ideate broadly, you really miss out on opportunities to draw from a variety of different contexts that might actually help you to solve problems in new ways that are a little bit curious or different. And so I think that this is a really important part to bring to the concept of prototyping in the way that we apply this. And we have to be really mindful that we tend to gravitate towards solutions, and we need to be really cognizant of that when we're trying to design to make sure that we're designing something that's the best solution that we can. Another piece to put in the thing here about questions is I was listening to this interview earlier in the year with James Clear and Tim Ferriss on Tim's podcast. And one of the things he said that really resonates with me is this idea of the robustness of questions compared to advice or solutions. And so, James says, questions are really resilient. They're adaptable to the context, whereas advice is really brittle. It's context dependent. Somebody might have a good plan. It might be a really good piece of advice to give you, but if it doesn't fit your context, then it's actually not good advice for you. Whereas questions are really adaptable. And so I think this is a lot of times I think we tend to think the solution, that's a really valuable part. That's what I want to find. But actually the questions and really sitting with questions and embracing the power of questions can be really valuable. And so I think put together with this idea of prototyping as this idea of embodying a question and realizing that questions are such a robust and powerful tool for us to be able to think about the world and apply to different situations that we may encounter makes this type of approach really powerful. Okay, so just kind of drawing to the close of this intro here of what the prototyping mindset is, a definition that we use a lot in the engineering department at MUD about the prototyping mindset is that it's a willingness to test out a solution. It's likely not the final or best solution, to learn from the failures and successes, to evolve, and then to try again. And I think the key piece and value and power of this is that this means that it's going to apply across a wide range of domains. We can apply this to engineering problems we may face in any of the different domains of engineering or across the domains of engineering. But I think that what I'd like to suggest today is that this prototyping mindset is actually more valuable to even think outside of a traditional engineering context where we're applying it to a design problem, but think maybe what's the design problem that's embedded in our life? What are the questions that we're trying to answer? The way that we're trying to form a life that's a meaningful life. And so this can help us to make progress on these so-called wicked problems, right? These are these very complex and interdisciplinary problems that span a lot of areas. So you may think about, renewable energy or climate change, or now artificial intelligence is the latest one that I've been thinking a lot about, which is they're really challenging to get a grip on. It's not a very constrained domain of a problem. And so we really need this engineering design process. And then this also may be a valuable tool for us to apply a lens through which to see our life and actually the way we can make progress on the things that matter to us, the things that we care about. Okay, so before long, I'm drinking the Harvey Mudd engineering Kool-Aid. And so we're going to get to robots and control systems, and everything is a block diagram sooner or later. So when I think about the prototyping mindset, I really think about this in the context of the kind of Harvey Mudd block diagram context of performing a systems analysis, right? Looking at this as an engineering system. And so here you can see a picture from one of my E79 practicum sections, which is the engineering department's contribution to the core curriculum. And in that class, they design these PVC underwater robots here. And then in one of the labs, they launch them into the tank and do proportional control with a control system to be able to control the depth of the robot. So it goes, okay, I want this thing to go down 0.5 meter. And so it goes down 0.5 meter, and then we'll use the control system using feedback to be able to see a specific place that that the system wants to be to achieve that desired position. So the prototyping mindset in this context is really about a closed loop feedback system. So if you're not familiar, this is the crash course on open loop versus closed loop control. And the high level idea is that open loop control, right, is basically a straightforward way to try to control a system where you have some output you want to get to and you feed that into your system. That goes into your controller, which is going to convert that to some action that it's going to apply to the process. Maybe in the context of E79, this is applying a certain voltage to your motor to drive your robot down a certain amount. And then you get your output of that, which is like, let's say the depth that you're going to, that you want to get to. But the problem with this is you have no way to know if your actual output is anything like your desired output because you don't have a measure of your current state, right? You don't have an estimate of what's going on. So a much more powerful architecture is a closed loop control system, where now the addition to this is that we've added a loop that's going from our output back through some sort of measurement device, which we're using to estimate the current state of our robot, let's say, and then feed that back into a node here, which is going to compute some measure of the error, right? And we can think of the error here as the difference between where we are and where we want to be. And using that error signal, now we change our controller such that our controller says, okay, we're this far away from where we want to be. And so we're going to do some new action based on that difference, as opposed to just our desired output. And so there's a lot more information in this system that actually helps us to achieve and maintain a certain position because we have some information about where we are and how that's compared to our where we want to be. And I think that this is really a key piece to kind of understand and think about when we think about engineering design process and the prototyping mindset. Okay. As I was talking in the car the other day with one of my colleagues as we were coming back, he reminded me of this really good quote from Ira Glass. So you may be familiar with Ira Glass as, this radio personality on NPR. And he wrote this really good piece, which I think he gets the prototyping mindset. And so he says, all of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's this gap. For the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making, it's not so good. It's not great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. A lot of people never get past that phase. They quit. Everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through years where they had really good taste and they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it fell short. Everybody goes through that. And if you're just starting out, or if you're still in this phase, you got to know it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is do a lot of work. Just keep going. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month, you know you're going to finish one story. It's only by going through a volume of work that you're going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It took a while to figure out how to do this. I took longer to figure out how to do this than anyone I've ever met. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while. You just have to fight your way through that. And I think that what I really love about this is, again, this idea that we put this process in place and we trust it, right? We have a process where we know where we want to be. In Ira Glass's frame, right? Maybe he's not thinking of a block diagram, but I sure am, right? Taste is this desired output, right? This is my taste, or this is my goal. This is where I want to get. And then I see what I'm actually getting here after I feed this through whatever process I have in place here. And I see when I compare my actual output to my desired output, I'm coming up short. But I know that I'm coming up short. And so I'm going to do something about that in my control loop here to say, let's see if I can move myself a little bit closer to where I want to be by changing what I'm doing a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of an overview, prototyping mindset, and a general framing of like a lens that I hope that you can see this through. And really what I want to do for the remainder of the time together is talk a little bit about some tools of the prototyping mindset, and then talk about some show and tell of examples of how I use these tools and think about using these tools in my own life, with the hope that maybe this would spark some ideas for you, and again, spark some future conversation that we might have to continue the discussion. Okay, tools of the prototyping mindset. So it's not an exhaustive list, but this is a subset of them that I think are helpful to think about. So first is a bias towards action. This is saying we're gonna try things. We just want to try things out. The second one is the reframe, thinking about what is our perspective on something. Curiosity is another tool, right? Being curious, asking questions, realizing that these questions are really robust. Storytelling is another one. We learn a lot about things by telling the story of it, right? As humans, we're very narrative-driven people. And so we learn a lot by listening to stories that others are telling, and also telling stories ourselves about our own process. And that can be a part of what this feedback loop is, of reflection. Radical collaboration is another tool of the prototyping mindset, where you think kind of crazy about how you might work with people across a variety of different domains, right? And I think that this type of radical collaboration is becoming more and more important for us to have in place as we're dealing with these wicked problems, right? These interdisciplinary complex problems that cross a lot of domains. We need to be able to have depth ourselves to be able to understand the basics of the variety of these different fields. But we also need to work really, really widely across disciplinary boundaries to be able to tackle these problems and solve them well. The last one is mindfulness of process. So again, a lot of the prototyping mindset is this idea of trusting the process, having a process in place, and then being mindful of what that process is. And maybe at a meta level, at some point, you need to actually adjust the feedback system that you put in place too. Okay, so a couple examples of these. So embrace action. So one of my favorite writers and artists is Austin Kleon. If you're not familiar with his work, you really should go pick up any one or all three of his books up here. They're really short, nice, like very curiosity-provoking reads. He also has a really good email newsletter and website, and is probably he's definitely a positive influence on my Twitter feed as compared to maybe some other folks. One of the things that Austin Kleon really encourages me about is to embrace action, right? This bias towards action. I think he's a great example of this. And he has this quote that I paraphrased here from David Carr, who said, "Nobody cares about your resume. You just want to see what you've made with your own little fingers." And I really like that idea of like, just do it, right? Try something out. Like, don't just have something on paper, like, okay, that's somewhat valuable, but like, do some stuff, build some things. And again, this is really resonant with kind of the MUD ethos, I think, as well. So now, of course, you're going to get a little bit of, I can't make this a totally non-technical talk, but when I think about bias towards action, it reminded me of in undergrad, I vividly remember this moment in class where we were talking about electronic oscillators, okay? So the basic block diagram picture of an electronic oscillator is something like this. You basically have an amplifier here, you have your output voltage here, and you put this feedback network in such that you take an output, feed it through your feedback network, and then put it into your amplifier to be able to generate the oscillation that you want at the outside. So maybe you want to generate some sinusoidal wave at the output, right? To, maybe for a radio or something else would be a common place you would want to use this. So if you look at like a common architecture for this, the Hartley oscillator, if you have any, you may be saying, what are all these components? What's going on? I have no idea what's going on, Josh. But trust me when I say that this is, a common architecture here. And the question that you ask, if you show this to somebody who has some idea with electronics is, okay, you told me this thing is going to oscillate, right? So it's going to go back and forth between, some different values. It's not going to be a constant value. But where is the source of the oscillation, right? If I look in this, there's no input AC signal, right? Like you get out of your wall or out of a function generator. All you have here is just this battery, a DC power source, right? Which is just a constant current. It's not oscillating in any way. But the power of this, right? So I remember vividly my professor in undergrad asking me, what kickstarts the oscillator? And after the class kind of sat there a little bit curious for a while, the answer is noise, right? And so I thought, what a beautiful illustration of the power of putting the right framework around something, and then saying, all you need to do to kickstart this in the presence of the right process is a little bit of noise. And you just got to try a little something. And noise by definition, right, may not be actually correlated with what you care about. It's just some randomness, right, in the world. And so this actually, the fact that the noise kickstarts this is a good reminder that just put that feedback system in place, trust it, and then just do something to kickstart it. And then you'll let the feedback loop actually be able to give you what you need to be able to turn in the right direction and make use of that initial kickstart. Okay, another one. This is perspective matters. So some of you may have seen this. This is a trend that's been going around on social media lately that made me chuckle when I saw it at first. And so the idea is basically, if you look, right, think about perspective matters. Now, when you first look at this picture, you may think, when I say perspective matters, right, what I'm trying to say is that the perspective of a 50,000-foot view of the ground matters, right? Well, actually, I guess this analogy kind of pitches at multiple levels, because the whole trend behind this meme on social media is something about like faking a flight, right? And so if you zoom out a little bit about what's going on, what you'll see is somebody's cropped this image of a laundry detergent bottle and taken a picture with their phone underneath with this, image of from an aerial shot, and they've just zoomed in and cropped it such that it looks like you're through an airplane window, right? And I think, okay, this is a silly example, right? But I think the idea holds more broadly that there's a lot of things in life that are like this silly laundry detergent bottle with a phone behind it, right? It's a lot of things that if you are zoomed in too close, if you're in the weeds of it, you really can't understand what's going on and how to really understand it in context. And so what we need is tools to be able to reframe, right? To think about what's the framing that we're taking to a problem, and how might we think about it in a different way, view it from a different angle, and what might that do to help us to think about it in different ways and maybe make traction on it. So one example that I think about a lot in the context of Harvey Mudd is, in the engineering department, we talk a lot about this because we have a lot of requirements, right, for classes. And sometimes the challenge with that, because we embrace this general engineering framework and idea, is that there's a lot of requirements. And so there's a sense sometimes of there's not much choice, right, for students to be able to choose their own path through the engineering major. There's a lot of stuff they have to take, and the open spaces that are left to be able to choose a particular course of study can be somewhat limited. But I think one reframe on this that I often try to encourage students to think about is that these requirements are actually a result of your past agency, your past choices. So you came to Harvey Mudd because you believed in the power of this general engineering program. You believed in the power of the core curriculum and what a liberal arts education is really about. And so seen in that light, it's not so much that you don't have agency now, it's you actually have agency, and now you're just working out the downstream consequences of the agency, of the choices you've already made, of the agency you've already exercised. I think there's a lot of things in life that can be helpful in order to think about, what are the things I can change here? What are the things that I can't change that maybe are gravity problems, or things that I just need to accept, right? That I'm not able to change, but I just need to figure out a way to cope with or deal with them. And then, how is the place that I am now, maybe actually I don't have much agency right now, but it's actually something that I chose back in the day. Or, what would I rather be doing than what I'm doing? Maybe I'm having a tough day at work and I'm not really enjoying what I'm working on, but would I rather be doing something else? Like, there's a lot of other things that maybe I would enjoy less, right? And so the reframe is a really powerful thing to think about how to view things from different angles. Okay, radical collaboration. This was probably the best book that I read in 2022. This is a book by Monica Guzman. She is a journalist, lives up in Seattle, and it's a really beautiful book about curiosity, and her the subtitle, if you can't quite make it out there, is How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. And she actually does work with this group, Braver Angels, which you may have heard about, which is dedicated to having these kind of stimulating curious conversations across political divides. And while you should definitely go pick up this book and read the whole thing, one piece I just want to lift out of this that I thought was really helpful is this idea of the conversation tile, right? And so in this idea of prototyping mindset and a prototype being a conversation with somebody, I think it's helpful to put some framing about how do we have good conversations, right? And she has this conversation dial, which is just like this, this graphic over here. And she breaks it down into these 5 different elements: embodiment, parity, attention, time, and containment. I thought this was really genius, and I hadn't really seen this anywhere else. And the idea is that you can think about what type of depth can this conversation bear based on these 5 traits. So, for example, embodiment, right? This is about, are we doing this over Zoom? Is this over phone? Is this over text? Or am I sitting in person across a table eating food with someone, right? Over dinner, having a conversation. The level of embodiment has a big difference in terms of the type of conversation and maybe the depth of topic the rawness that we can actually get to. Parity, right? Are we on the same playing field? Is there a power differential at play here? Is there something that we should be aware of where we're not on an even playing field? Attention. Are we able to really attend to each other in this conversation? Have we maybe put aside our phones and distractions and set aside the time to really focus on each other? Time. Have we set aside enough time to be able to make sure that the conversation has the legs to be able to make it around so that we can really dig into some nuance and maybe work through some things in the conversation that are going to take some time to work out? Maybe if we only have 5 minutes while we're in line together at a store, it's not a time to really have a deep conversation about the meaning of life. But maybe if we say we have a whole evening to be able to start to talk about something at that level of depth, we might be able to get some value out of that. And then containment. This has to do with where is this conversation going? Is this a conversation that's in public? Are we in private? Do we feel that we can trust our conversation partner to keep what we're saying private? Is this a conversation just between two of us, or is this a conversation in a group? And so I think what I appreciate about this is that we really need to be able to collaborate very radically across and in ways that are very curious and have some maybe different looks to them. And conversation for me, I think, is really at the key to what we need to do to be able to build these bridges across really tough or wide divides. And I just really thought that this framework was super helpful from that. Another thing which I need to mention while I'm in this slide is that my favorite reframe that Monica brings up in her book is she says, instead of asking why, ask how. So if you want to ask someone, for example, who you have you disagree with their political orientation, right? Maybe instead of saying, okay, why are you of a certain political stripe, right? Ask them how they came to be that point of view, right? How did you come to develop your perspective as a conservative or a liberal or a libertarian, right? What was part of the process that brought you to that point? And I really thought this was a genius way. She pointed out that when we ask why, we put our conversation partner on the defensive. We make them have to try to defend it, right? Because we automatically are like, well, why? What do you mean why? Like, this is because, like, don't you know, right? As opposed to how, which really engages this storytelling lens to say, invite other people to say, I really want to hear your story. I want to know how you came to believe what you do. And then really helps it's just a totally different framing to a conversation. And I've used that a lot and found it to be really, really helpful in having good conversations. Okay, last one is this mindfulness of process. And the eighth wonder of the world means starting small is okay. So in combination with having a system that's going to give you feedback, the eighth wonder of the world references to this Einstein quote, which says, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And I think that, so you look at whether it's the skyline here, which has this kind of exponential looking shape to it here, or you think about, obviously this is good financial advice, but I think it's really good advice for a lot of other things in life as well, right? To say, what are the ways that you can focus on getting 1% better on a consistent basis, right? If you can do 1% better over time, that is going to give you a compounding gain, which we just have a really bad intuition about exponentials, right? As humans, we think linearly. We take a trend and we just extrapolate linearly. Well, it doesn't work well in finance, right? And it also doesn't work well when you're trying to develop these habits. I think the key thing that I take away from this is don't underestimate the power of starting small. Again, it's a defense of the bias towards action. Just start. Even if it's the littlest thing you can imagine. What's the littlest thing you need to do? Because all you need to do is start that process and then keep iterating and building from there. Okay. Next part here is just prototyping show and tell. So I want to just think about some of the ways that I've been trying to embrace these prototyping mindset tools in my own life, and just kind of go through a couple of these examples. So this is just kind of a short list of some of the different things I've been trying. So reading, journaling, writing, pizza, and pedagogy. Pizza and pedagogy, that'd be a good class. I should figure out a way to offer that. So first, reading. So this was one of my best purchases during the pandemic. I picked up a Kindle. I got one like used, refurbished for like $30 and worth every penny. And then, probably times 10 at least. And I really embraced kind of a prototyping mindset with this. I just said, I'm going to read every day, right? this Jerry Seinfeld method of the, don't break the chain, basically. Like just try to read every day, put an X on the calendar, and I just give myself permission. It's like, I don't have any requirement on how long I read, just pick up the book and go. And what's been interesting to me is that even that, again, you saw before my two kids, right, who let's say frequently wake me up in the middle of the night, even now sometimes. But even in the midst of that, of busy life as a professor and a young dad and young husband, you can power through. You can actually make pretty significant progress when you do that consistently over the course of a year. So I think in 21, I was somewhere around 37 books, 2022 at 45, and this year so far I'm at 16. Now, granted, the 16 from this year, there are a couple of John Steinbeck short novels in there that are about 100 pagers. So whether you want to derate those or not is your decision. But in 21 and 22, I will say that there's some good Russian literature in there too, with Anna Karenina and the brothers Karamazov. So I guess maybe in the, at the end of the day, it balances itself out. But I think the key thing is I've really seen that this methodology works for me. Before bed every night, have the Kindle and just read for 10, 15 minutes. And it's really been a great way for me, again, in the context of that Ira Glass quote, to develop taste too, right? Especially as I want to be writing and communicating and storytelling. You really have to be reading, and a lot of our culture seems to have shifted towards more short form stuff because of our attention our attention span is really tough. But really reading longer books is super great and helpful. I'd also highly recommend this, just a shout out for my colleague Francis Sue's book, Mathematics for Human Flourishing. If you haven't read that yet, you should. And even if you're not a mathematician, it doesn't matter, read it. The beauty of that book is that it's all about math as this general human endeavor that's valuable for everybody. Okay, journaling in cursive is another one. So when I was listening to that James Clear interview on the Tim Ferriss show earlier the year, he had this whole section where he was talking about his annual review. What are the questions that he asked himself at the beginning of the year? And so this year I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm going to do an annual review. This is a good thing to like get in the habit of doing, and found a template online of some questions and just sat with it for a while. And as I was looking back over my past year, I realized that there were a lot of gaps in what I remembered of my days. I could have some sense of like on a month scale, like what was going on, but I lost a lot of the details because I didn't write it down, right? I didn't document it anywhere. And so I said, okay, this year I'm going to try a new journaling thing. And so inspired by some stuff I saw on Twitter, I kind of modified, tweaked it a little bit to play into my alliterative habit here, and just have 3 prompts every night: accomplishment, anxiety, appreciation. And I found this to be a really helpful way for me to, again, in this context of like, don't break the chain every night. I give myself permission. You can write 1 word, 2 words, a sentence, whatever. And it's been a helpful way, I think, for me when I do my annual review next year to be able to look back and have more resolution on what's going. And it also really helps to, again, embrace curiosity and a reframe. The second kind of add-on with this is that I've been getting into fountain pens lately, and have been revitalizing cursive, which is something I hadn't really touched since I was in elementary school. But that's been a kind of fun thing to redo too, and get back into this embodied, like physical sense of writing, which I've been enjoying. Okay, writing. On the writing side, so this was a 2022 prototype for me that's really been growing and been a big part of what I like to do every week now too, which is every Tuesday I write a newsletter, email newsletter. And this is, again, what resonates with the Ira Glass quote, right? Have a schedule and stick to it. And you just got to realize you have taste, you know what good writing looks like, and you know you're not making it. And trust me, if you look back at some of the 2022 ones, and maybe even some of the ones now, right? Some of it's not where I want it to be, right? But the only way you get better at these things is by trying it, and then reflecting on how does it look? How does it feel to you? What's not right about it? What are as you're reading these great authors and great writers, what's the feedback you're taking for the strategies that they're using, the way that they tell stories, the way that they talk, the way that they write, the sentence structure, the descriptions that they use. And so this has been really a piece of something that I've really enjoyed doing over the last year. And it gives me a weekly place to essentially journal in public, right? And so I was really inspired by this, again, Austin Kleon book here, Show Your Work. And his big thesis that I took away from this book was build in public, right? Just you can't be too afraid of what other people are going to think about what you're doing. You just have to know that like you're going to publish it, you're going to put it out there and put it out there in a generative frame, and hopefully that resonates with people and they can take something from it, and you're just sharing your work. In terms of the audience, mostly I write this for something that I'm enjoying and thinking about, right? And I'm just tickled and really enjoy when other folks, I hope that somebody else can learn something from it, but it's been fun. So I just write a little essay every week, and then a book nook, which again, that feeds into it's a forcing function for my reading habit. If I do one of these every week, I got to try to hit, order of 52 a year. Professor is in, which is just something I'm doing at Mudd to kind of keep a little journal and log of, my life as a professor at Harvey Mudd. Leisure Line, something I'm doing outside of work, and then Still Life, which is just a photo of something I've, interesting of the week. So the other thing I'll say about this, so part of the thesis and the ethos behind this is, I think Harvey Mudd has a really unique mission, and I'm sure many of you who are alums think the same. And I think what I really want to do, and part of the rationale for this is the place I want to try to stick some pins in the ground of conversations I want to have with students that are outside of the class. It may not fit inside my experimental engineering class, right? To say to talk about this at depth, but I really want to use this as a medium, as a mechanism for students to hopefully reflect on this. And then when they come by my office for office hours, or just are, swinging by, to hopefully provoke a little bit of thought so that we can talk more about what does it mean for the integration of all these things? What does it mean that we're developing a way to see the world and see the world in a way that we understand the impact of our work, right? Really at the heart of the Harvey Mudd mission statement. I think that the more that we can do to really drill down into understanding and talking about that, having conversations about that, the better. And so this is kind of my thing I'm trying to do to contribute to that. Okay, pizza. So this was a 2022 habit. I got a Uni pizza oven. I always, again, being from Connecticut, New Haven pizza is kind of best of the best. So this is a picture from Sally's when I was home last. Sally's a Pizza from last summer, and they have the far one here. You can see is this potato rosemary sage, which is just a really, really good pizza. And so I've been trying to get back to, sorry if you're, like Chicago deep dish pizza, but this is real pizza. This has got the, the really thin crust. That's where I'm at, New Haven. My biases are on the table. You also notice that if you know anything about New Haven pizza, there's often a conversation in running about Sally's, Pepe's, and Modern. You'll notice Modern's not on here. Sally's and Pepe's, I think, are like the two in battle. Pepe's kind of takes the cake for me, but I really like this potato rosemary from Sally's. So this is something I've been kind of prototyping. Again, bias towards action. And I make a lot of pizza now, which is super fun. And it's fun last summer I brought the oven because it's pretty portable to campus too, and made some pizza with students, which was fun. Teaching. Okay, so of course, this prototyping mindset, most of this stuff I've been talking about is outside of the classroom, but it also impacts the way I think about my teaching and experimenting with things. So just a couple of things that I've been playing around with recently. One was in MicroPs, which is the upper division tech collective that I teach in embedded systems, working on these. We did these final reports, and I thought, let's see if we can change this up and get the same learning objective, but maybe make it a little bit more engaging for students and a little easier for them to share their work. Again, with this ethos of build in public, right? And so last year for the class, I had them do all these final project websites, record a video of their project, and then all the documentation, the material is basically the same as what would be in the final report, but that they have the final projects listed as a website. I think that was a good success, and again, have some ideas of feedback of things to improve this fall. But really, I think that students enjoyed that, and it's good for them to be able to show, again, in the context of that quote earlier about showing your work, right? Not just having a resume, but what did you do? What did you build? Clickers is another thing. So this is something I'm trying to do with low stakes quizzes. So you may be familiar with a clicker question to do multiple choice questions in the classroom. These clickers are the P is for paper clickers. So they're rotationally variant. So depending on which way you hold these things up, they answer a different A, B, C, or D. And so then you can scan these things at the front of the classroom to be able to record students' answers and be able to do, quick checks of, how the material is sinking in. So this is another thing I've been trying. And then transparent teaching practices is something I'm always really engaged with, of how can I really foster a strong relationship between the student and the, myself as the professor, right? How can we engage in the learning process together collaboratively and really get engagement and buy-in from them to be able to realize that we're in this journey together of learning, and that I'm more like a curator of one of my colleagues in the math department talks about how he's begun to see his role as a teacher as more as curation. And that really resonates with me as I think about how do I put together this, sort of like a dish, right? Or like something I'm presenting to the students of, here's something to taste and try out. And, I've curated this together, but let's experience it together and see what's resonating, kind of coach you through it, as opposed to a more hierarchical relationship where I'll teach you the way to do it and you do it the way I say it, and that's that. The other stuff in the hopper. So this is stuff that's not quite fully baked yet, but I've been thinking a lot about ungrading and mastery-based grading as a strategy to try to, again, embrace. Dan Pink in his book Drive talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose as like these three legs of the motivation 3.0 framework that's really key to in the knowledge work economy. And so I've been trying to think about ways to embrace that in my teaching. And then again, to think about education, not just as vocational training, right? At Harvey Mudd, we kind of rejected that thesis that really education is about a combination. Yes, you're going to get skills, but it's actually a lot about forming who you are as a person, and then understanding not just those skills on their own, what are they for, but like, how are you going to use them in the world? What's the impact that they have? How do you reflect on that? And so that's something else I'm looking to continue to do, is figure out how to integrate these things, both at a course level and also at a larger program level. I also just wanted to put a little bit of a pin here to say this is some stuff so we have 2 courses now. This is work that's really spearheaded by our department chair, Nancy Lape, and she's developed these 2 new courses, which are based off the Stanford Life Design kind of format. A bunch of us in the department went through these life design workshop studios, and then we've taken that and kind of found out how to map that, prototypes, how to map that onto the Mudd curriculum. So we have 2 courses, one that's for sophomores, one that's for seniors, to embrace this prototyping mindset. The sophomore one is more about how do you make the most out of your Mudd experience, right? As you go through your Mudd experience, how do you make the college experience what you want it to be, right? Taking this kind of proactive as opposed to reactive approach to college. And then the prototyping your future self has a little bit more of a career focus to it, thinking, okay, after college, what type of a career do I want, right? And not just in this whole, like, here's the opportunities that are available to me, which one do I want to pick? But really thinking more broadly than that and saying, actually, there's a great opportunity to be able to create opportunities and maybe make a position or put together a career, build a career that takes a little bit of this, a little bit of that, puts it together in a way that's going to be rewarding. And so we do this through modules, and then they do a prototype each week, and then they meet with each other and build these different plans as they go through, again, and building these embodied questions, these prototypes, conversations, or artifacts. Okay. I know we're running a little bit short on time here. I just want to close with a couple of things. So one thing that I've been thinking, and I think that's a valid critique of the prototyping mindset, is this really doesn't address some of the fundamental philosophical questions that sit underneath the question of how do I actually make progress in my life, and really answer the question of what does it mean to have a meaningful life? What does it mean to have a meaningful career? And we really, I think, need the tools of philosophy to be able to answer these. And one of the books I've been reading recently is this, The Good Life Method, which is, again, talking about how do we reason through these big questions. And I think I've been thinking about how do we pair this idea of like a philosophical lenses to help students and ourselves understand what are some of the ways to actually see the world, and what it means to flourish, what it means to have a meaningful life, and then apply the prototyping mindset in that context. And then also to think about how does this prototyping mindset help us to attack some of the world's big problems and really zoom out and think big. Okay, a lot of book recommendations. This is just a short subset here. I think if you are at Harvey Mudd or you have any connection with Harvey Mudd, this book Range, I just finished this one recently. This one, the subtitles here, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. This is super resonant with the kind of Mudd philosophy, liberal arts college philosophy. I already told you about, I never thought of it that way. That's I think a must read, very, very good and a really engaging read. This set of lectures is from 1989, The Real World of Technology, but it's prescient with all the artificial technology stuff going on today. It's by a Canadian physicist, Ursula Franklin. And it's really beautiful. And it could have been written yesterday, even though it was from 1989. Tranquility by Tuesday. This is, I think, again, kind of correlated or connected with the prototyping mindset. A lot of these kind of self-helpy type stuff, and Atomic Habits fits into that same kind of bucket, I would say, in terms of, useful strategies that resonate with the prototyping mindset approach. And then Austin Kleon, you already heard about. I'm a big fan of Austin Kleon. His books are also really wonderful. Lots of visual note-taking, visual storytelling type stuff that he's drawn in those. Okay, so to close, I just want to have one last story and then a poem to actually close us out for today. So the first one is Put in Your Reps. So this is Jerry Yulesman. He's now passed away, but he was a photography professor at the University of Florida. And he had a film photography class, and he had split his class into two groups. I'm still figuring out how to do this. One day I'm doing this in one of my classes. I haven't figured it out yet, but this is connected to that ungrading, mastery grading thing. He had two groups, and he had group A. You get graded on the quality of the best photo you take. And the second group, you get graded on the quantity of photos you take, right? And so the idea is you can go in here, and this is like applying the engineering design process. You can apply this thing once and do your very best job on every single step in the design process, but you only get one shot. Or you can take as many shots of the engineering design process as you can. You can iterate as many times as you can. And maybe each individual process or run of the design process won't be as good as you could make it. But the question is, which one of these is better, right? And the interesting thing he found was that at the end of the term, all of the best photos came from the quantity group. So even though that group A was just solely focused on this goal of making the best photo, taking the best photo, right? Composing it. I think the kind of lesson to take away from this is that it's actually really valuable to take a lot of shots, because we learn from the process of feedback. And connected with this, again, this Ira Glass idea of taste, right? We know what we want, but to get there, we have to keep trying things. We got to try it out and test it out and then compare it to that. Okay, and the poem. This one, I found this one last year. It's, I think, a really good mud ethos, a good way to kind of close out. So it's called 1,000 to 1 by this poet Bertrand Braley. There's 1,000 can't be doners for the one who says it can, but the whole amount of deeds that count is done by the latter clan. For the can't be doners grumble and hamper, oppose and doubt, while the daring man who says it can proceeds to work it out. There isn't a new invention beneath the shining sun that was ever wrought by the deed or thought of the tribe of can't be done. For the can't be doners mutter, while the can be's cool, sublime, make their notions work till the others smirk. Oh, we knew it all the time. Oh, the can be's clan is meager, its membership is small, and it's mighty few who see their dreams come true or hear fame's trumpet call. But it's better to be a can be and labor and dream and die than one who runs with the can't be dones who haven't the pluck to try. So with that, I'll just close and say, if you're interested in learning more, again, please connect, either send me an email or you can subscribe to the newsletter or connect over Twitter or LinkedIn. And with that, I'll close and just ask, what are you curious about? And I'd love to hear any questions and find ways to continue the conversation beyond just this talk. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. So we do have time for a few questions. If you have any, please put them in the Q&A. But I'm going to start off with this question. Can you comment on the notion of a practical limit on failure? Should such a notion even be allowed?
Yeah, so I think, I think what I kind of take at the root of this question is, is there, so we say kind of when we embrace this bias to action, right, we're kind of embracing the possibility of failure and actually saying, we know we're going to fail, right? And I think that in maybe the extended text of that question, something about Edison, right? And like failing and, okay, he almost drove himself crazy, right? Like trying to possess with pursuing this. And I think for me, yes, we have to be careful to keep this in balance. And I think this is where it's helpful to, again, have a meta sort of reflective step. We have this prototyping mindset, but we need to have these processes of regular review to say, like, is what I'm doing working? And I think this frame of flourishing really helps too. Like maybe this is helping to me make progress on something, but maybe there's also unhelpful parts to that are not not like getting me where I want to go. And so what adjustments am I going to make to my process to actually try to embrace flourishing as opposed to just, really burning myself out. And this is where it's helpful, again, to form teams and collaborate, that kind of idea of radical collaboration to connect with other people in your work.
Great, thank you. All right, we are coming up on the hour. So Josh, I want to thank you for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and insights with us. Thank you to our audience for your questions and for attending this event. We will follow up within the next week with a recorded video and any presentation material. This is our last Mud Talks for the academic year. We hope you've enjoyed this year's Mud Talks. If you are interested in being a Mud Talk speaker for the next academic year, please contact us at alumni@hmc.edu. All events can be found on our website, alumni.hmc.edu. Have a great night and see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.